Hey everyone, today we're taking a look at this, an 8800 GT. Specifically, it's XFX's AlphaDog version of the card. It had its initial release back in late 2007, 14 years ago now. I'm unsure of how much it cost, but the reference 8800 GT was marketed somewhere between $200 to $250 at the time, although due to supply issues, it routinely sold for over $300. I got this card from a friend of mine who himself was handed it by someone in his work, and from what I can remember, it was either kept or used in a building environment of some kind, which explained the sheer amount of dust built up inside the heatsink. There were a couple more issues with the card too, but I'll get into that later on. That aside, let's get a look at some of the specs of the 8800 GT before we get into the benchmarks of this once great mid-range card. Based on the G92 GPU, the 8800 GT AlphaDog edition featured 754 million transistors, built on the 65nm fabrication process, and ran at 602 MHz on the core, with a 1512 MHz shader clock as well. Memory-wise, we're looking at 512 MB of GDDR3 memory on a 256-bit bus, running at 900 MHz, which is effectively 1800 MHz due to how DDR memory works. We've also got support for DirectX 10 at a maximum, which does limit your choices of games today, although there are still plenty of games available to you. For video output, there are two DVI connectors as well as a S-Video connector for older TVs too. It also requires one 6-pin PCIe power connector. We are kicking off with the Adventure Pals, an indie-developed adventure platforming game which can run on pretty much anything. This game ran great throughout, as I was kind of expecting, although there will be occasional, very minor hitches throughout, which you will barely notice unless you're specifically looking for them. And this is true for the more graphically intense dungeon-like areas as well, such as the third one on here. This actually ran far better than the GT710 did in the last video, which was surprising but kind of makes sense as the 710 was meant to be really low end and used as a video adapter, unlike the 8800 GT. With the overclock, we managed maximum stable clocks of 725 MHz, 1620 MHz, and 950 MHz on the core, the shader, and the memory respectively, which didn't help out with the stuttering here, unfortunately. I thought it had it first, but I think it was merely a placebo effect. The original Crysis, which released back in 2007 now, was a bit of a weird one to test, as at seemingly random points, it would have this really stuttery appearance. This didn't seem to be caused by the graphics card not being able to run the settings I used, as it happened even when well below 100% GPU usage as well. And it didn't show up in the graph of the frame times which CapFrameX captures. This is the program that I use to capture the benchmark figures, so I've no idea what was actually happening. Luckily, it wasn't so much that it ruined gameplay. That aside, the game generally ran quite well, with the occasional but quite brief hitch. The most intense moments, like explosions and fire happening in front of you, like the fire you see at the fuel station when fighting towards the school later on in the island level, could cause a bit of stutter too. I had to cap the frame rate to 60 to prevent any major stuttering, but otherwise it ran great. There was another moment, specifically the bit where you talk to Prophet after discovering Jester's body, where performance became noticeably stuttery with FPS dipping to the low 40s at worst. The overclock made no difference to the random stuttering I saw, but the parts I did mention it had stutter had noticeably improved, although it's not gone completely. GTA 5, which released on PC back in 2015 now, could also run well enough to be playable too, at 720p with the lowest settings, and with shadows disabled through the XML settings file. Driving through the city at night showed performance to be reasonably smooth. There was some slightly noticeable micro-stuttering, but it's not to the point you'll notice it much here. It is much the same when driving during the day as well. You may notice the odd hitch now and again, but it generally runs quite well here. There's a few minor hitches on the highway heading out towards Sandy Shores, and you'll notice a bit of stuttering in and around the Sandy Shores area too. When driving through the mountains towards the FIB building, the game unfortunately froze. This also happened at a few other points during gameplay whenever I tried to run the test again, so I eventually gave up on the benchmark, although I did actually discover why it happened, but more on that later on. We're finishing off with Skyrim, specifically the original version released back in 2011. This is being run here at 1600 by 900 with medium settings but low shadows, no anti-aliasing, and depth of field disabled through the game's configuration file. On the run through the woods into Riverwood, there were a few noticeable but brief hitches, with multiple small hitches going into the village as well. Nothing terrible, but you are going to notice them. On the way up towards Bleak Falls Barrow and Bleak Falls Temple, you'll get the odd brief hitch here as well, but other than that, the game runs great there. Inside the temple itself though, there are a few occasions, specifically the bit where you fight the guy in the first puzzle room, and the bit later on when you're in a green-lit cave area, where FPS dips just enough to cause some pretty severe stuttering, which actually happens in Riverwood Trader 2. This is caused by the game's forced use of VSync, which, when the FPS drops just enough, causes the frame rate to rapidly dip to 30 FPS and back. The overclock, which needed to be dropped slightly to 713 MHz for stability, did manage to make a big improvement to the VSync issues, however. Overall though, the game actually ran quite smooth, putting the VSync issues aside. So, to conclude, I'm impressed with how the 8800 GT performed today. It is a 14-year-old graphics card, but managed to run games to a playable level that were released years after itself. Now on to the problems that I mentioned earlier though. First and most noticeable being the fan, which is stuck at 100% speed. I'll try and get a decent shot of why this is, but this is caused by the fan only having 2 wires, so it is impossible for it to be controlled, so it just goes full blast all the time. It's not loud, but it is quite noticeable, and you will definitely hear it over gameplay. The issue with GTA 5, I found, was actually caused by the voltage the card runs at being too low. I confirmed this by modifying the BIOS and setting the voltage a little bit higher, which enabled me to run the GTA 5 benchmark with no issues. I've no way of confirming if this is an issue with all AlphaDog 8800 GTs or just my one though, and I also don't know if GTA 5 is the only issue this game crops up in. And to finish off, I'd like to thank Patreon supporters Jimmy the Bantam, Matt Esterak and Shadow in the Void for supporting me in creating this and other videos. I would also like to shout out Ginjar247, the friend who sent me the card you just watched a video on. He's a variety streamer on Twitch, and I'll link his channel in the description for anyone that would like to check him out. So hopefully you found my look at the XFX 8800 GT AlphaDog Edition interesting. And if you did, I'd appreciate a like. If not, click dislike and maybe comment with some constructive criticism on what you think I could have done better or differently. And remember to check out the rest of my videos too if you enjoyed this one. But for now, I'll hopefully see you in the next one.